The Commodore 64 was a serious computer and not just a games machine. So, let's have a look at what it can do. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. The Commodore 64 is the best-selling computer of all time, with between 12 and 17 million units sold worldwide during its 12-year production run, which started in 1982. Now, if you were in any way into computers or gaming in the 1980s, you'll be very familiar with the system, even if you never actually owned one. Now today obviously we can use emulators to turn our modern computers into Commodore 64s and replay all the great software titles. But more often than not, we just treat it as a pure games console and simply play through various top 10 lists of games. Now whilst this is great fun, it does miss out on so much of the computer's history and its potential. So in this video, I'll show you how to get the most from your emulator or from your original hardware by transporting you back to the 1980s to explore the glory days of home computing. So power up your flux capacitor, strap into your DeLorean, and let's go. To get started then, we're going to need an emulator. So the one I'm going to use is Vice, and that's pretty much the one that everybody uses for the Commodore machines. So if you head across to this web address, and again I'll put these links down in the description, we can simply go to the download section, and inside there you'll see it available for a number of different systems. So I'm working on Windows, so I'm going to download this first 64-bit version here with the GTK3 backend. The SDL2 is a different sort of graphics backend, but normally you'll want to run the GTK version. So this heads you across to a SourceForge page, and again we have to just wait for the download to start, and then that will then download it as a zip file and just save that somewhere on your computer. And there we have it. So I've created a Commodore 64 folder on my hard drive, and I'm just simply going to extract this now. So if I go to that and then just extract it here, we should find we now have a folder, and this is our Vice emulator. So if I go inside there, you'll see there's a range of folders, and inside this bin folder are the actual emulator executable files. So if I come down here, you'll see that these ones here are the actual emulators. So the Vice not only emulates the Commodore 64, which is this file here, but also the Commodore 128, some of the PET machines, the Plus4, and of course the VIC-20. So if I want to power up my Commodore 64, I'm just going to double click on this version here. And I now have my Vice emulator coming up, and I'm sitting at the startup screen for the Commodore 64. So that's our emulator all sorted, and we'll have a look at how we actually use this emulator in a second. But obviously we're going to need to get hold of some programs and files for this. So let's have a look and see where we can actually get hold of those. So with the Commodore 64 being such a popular machine, there were of course thousands and thousands of applications written for it, and there are some very dedicated people who archive absolutely everything ever created. So again, all of their information is available online, so just go and have a look for that. But if you go on to Google or something like that, if you search for Commodore 64 software, a lot of the times you'll come up with archives then in the Internet Archive, archive.org. And again, if you click through to any of these, you will find sort of endless amounts of software available for download. Now with this, of course, do make sure that you check the legal implications of downloading software in your region, and again, only download software which you know you are legally able to use. But again, as you can see, if we click through to some of these, you will find endless pieces of software for all the games, applications, and everything else you could ever think of that was produced for the Commodore 64. So I'm going to let you investigate those lists yourselves. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we use the emulator and then how we can explore all the full features of the Commodore 64. But of course, when we come across pieces of software that we want to have a go with, you will of course need to come into these archives and actually locate that software. So have a look through these. Again, I'll put links out to the Internet Archive and so on where you can get hold of the software, but do then go and get yourself some of these. A lot of them will provide you with sort of full downloads of the game archives, so you can actually get hold of absolutely everything in one go in either tape or disc format, and then just have everything sitting there ready and waiting for you. And as I go through this video, you'll show that that's exactly what I have done. I've just gone out, got hold of everything, and I now have a full archive of Commodore 64 software. So let's start having a look at how we can explore this fantastic system. To start, we just need to get a little bit of setup done and then learn how to actually use the Vice emulator to run bits of software. So the Commodore 64, especially in games, they did require, or a lot of them did require, a joystick to be connected. So let's connect up a joystick to our Vice emulator. So I have just a standard sort of Xbox style GameCon pad plugged into my PC. And if we go to Preferences and Settings, we can go into our joystick section, and you can see we have 2 joystick ports. Now, a lot of games require it to be plugged into joystick port number 2. And you can see there's a little selection box here to select how you want to run that joystick. So I'm selecting my gamepad down here, but you can of course then have nothing connected. You can use your numeric pad on your keyboard to simulate the joystick, or you can set up your own little keyboard settings for whatever keys you prefer to use. So I'm just going to set that up in my gamepad, and if I click close there, so I've got my status bars turned on. So I go to Preferences, I've got status bar showing, and that lets me see what's happening with my joysticks. So if I use my D-pad on my joypad, you can see there that we have our joystick working with our fire buttons, so our A and B, or south and east buttons give us the 2 joystick buttons. So that's all set up and ready to go. So now we need to see how to load some software titles in. So I've got some games saved here. So I'm going to start off with a couple of games. Again, the Commodore 64 had media either in cartridge formats. These .crt files are cartridges, which were physical ROM cartridges you plugged into the back of the machine. We then have cassette tapes. So these .t64, or there might be .tape files. Those simulate then the cassette tapes going into the dataset. And then we have our disk games or disk files on the .d64 format. And again, I think there are a couple of different formats for all of these different types of media. But again, Vice is pretty good at running any of them. So we come back across into Vice. To load a piece of software, we can do it in a couple of different ways, but most of it we will do through this Smart Attach option here. You can see that we have some options then for disk images, cassette images, and cartridge images. But Smart Attach sort of does a lot of it all in one go. So it will take you off to this little file explorer within the system. And you can see that I've browsed across to where I've got those files stored. And if I want to attach a piece of media, I simply need to select it. So let's try this Iridium game down here. You can see if I highlight it, we get sometimes we get some details up here which let you see exactly what it is. Again, sometimes the file names you find may not be as full as the ones I have here. But we then have the option then to either just simply attach the game or the file so we can use it, or we have then auto start. So I'm going to use auto start here because that is the easiest one, and that will automatically attach this tape file into the dataset and then run all the commands needed to load it and get that game up and running. So if I click auto start, we should find that that all happens. So you can see there the commands going in. It then will load it up and it will load it probably in sort of warp mode to get it all loaded up pretty quickly. And there you can see we are now straight into our Iridium. So let me just turn that music off first. So that was automatically loading and starting a cassette file. And again, it works exactly the same for cartridges and disk files. But sometimes we'll want to simply put some media into either our cassette tape drive or our floppy drive. And we can do that again using our file menu up here. So let's just simply put a floppy disk into drive number 8. So I can come down here to the attached disk image, and I'm going to put into drive 8, which is the standard sort of single disk drive for the Commodore 64. You can see now it's just listing out my Commodore, my disk files. So Turrican here, it came as a double-sided floppy disk, so you had to put one side in, then turn it over and play the other side. So in effect, it was two disks, I suppose you could call it. So disk 0 then is the one you start with. So let's highlight that, and let's just attach that onto our computer. So that disk is now sitting in our Drive 8 disk drive, and we need to use our Commodore language now to actually run that. So again, we'll see later on we can get hold of all the manuals for these so you can learn how to use your Commodore 64. But the command that I need to do then is I need to load and to use the asterisk, and that's from Drive 8. So I'm going to load the first thing on drive number 8. And if I press return for that, you can see that that is now searching for it. Now some of the operations that you'll have here take a bit of time, loading from cassette and loading from disk and so on. So if you haven't got warp mode turned on, that will actually warp mode in effect speeds the computer up. So as you can see at the moment, we're running at 100% CPU time. If I turn on warp mode, you can see we're now running at 7 times the normal speed, and that should then speed up all of these processes. And there we can see our disk is now loaded. So I can come up here and I can then run that piece of software. And there we are into our piece of software. Now you will find that quite a few of the software titles in the archives have been hacked by people. So that's not badly hacked. What they tend to do is they tend to come in and they put on little animations here, but also then have hacked the game to provide you with infinite lives and so on. So if I press space here, you can see that we're now going to jump into the game. But first of all, we go through the hack setup menu. And you can see it's telling us here that, again, it's saying it was trained by MGM and Tycoon. I don't know who those people are, but they obviously have hacked the code in the file and allow you then to have, in this instance, unlimited lives. So if I say no to that, and you can see there, so in this particular game, there's lots of different things that you can then in effect cheat on the game. But again, it lets you get through the game that bit easier. But again, if we say no to everything here, that eventually then drops us actually into the game itself. So it's going through some more disk loading here. So again, I can use my warp function to get past that pretty quickly. And that's the game actually up and running then. So this one here, we need to press our fire button to get past this screen. And of course, it's now saying then that it needs the second disk in. So we need to turn the disk over or attach the second disk. So if I go to my file menu, I can attach a disk image into Drive 8, and we're now going to attach that second side of the disk. I'm just going to attach that, and then I just press space, and that should let me then actually get into the game itself. So again, it's going through another loading process. Again, I can warp through that. And we are now into our Turrican game, and everything should now play as normal. So let's just come out of that for a second. So that's us now able to load and run commercial software titles. But part of the exploring the Commodore 64 is being able to actually type in our own code. And for that, we do need to be able to save it. Otherwise, we'll have to retype it in every single time. And if we're typing in a long listing from a magazine, we're not going to do it all in one go. So we do want to save it as we're going along, and obviously once we've finished. So I've just typed in a very simple program here. There's a little for next loop in Commodore Basic. So if I run that, it basically, let me just make sure I'm on this emulator here. So if I just run that, you can see that we just get a for next loop counting up to 10. But if I want to actually save that, then I can either save it to disk or to cassette. And again, Vice will emulate all of that for me. So if I come up to my file menu here, what I can do is I can actually put it onto a disk, so I can create and attach an empty disk image. So again, I now need to tell it where I want to save my disk. So if I come out to my Vice menu, into Commodore 64, I've got a folder for my saved disks here. So if I come in here, I can give this a name, and we're going to call this our for loop. I'm going to save it in and put it into Drive 8. And I'm just going to simply then create that blank disk. So I now have a blank diskette connected up to my Commodore 64. So if I want to save that to my disk, I type in the save command. I'm going to give it a name, so for loop, and I'm going to save it onto drive number 8, which is my floppy disk. So if I just press return for that, we can see that that is now saving that onto the disk drive itself, and that should now be ready. So if I now reset my machine, just to clear any code out of here, let's come down to reset and power cycle the machine. So if I do list, that should have nothing there. Again, although my disk is already attached, if I come up here and if I attach a disk image into drive 8, I should be able to come back out here to my saves and attach that for loop disk. So that should now be sitting in my disk drive. So if I do a load again, this time I'm going to load $, and what that does, it actually loads a directory of what is on that disk drive. So if I do that, and then if I do list, it should now tell me what's on that disk. So you can see here we have some stuff at the top. We have then, but our first sort of block of program code there is that for loop program that we actually loaded in. So I could now come up and I could say, so let's load. I can, again, if I have lots of different programs on there, I would use the name of it. Or if there's only one program on there, I could use the star to load the first thing. But we now have, and it's on drive 8. So if I say load for loop off drive 8 and press that, it should now have loaded it in. So if I now do list, and we have retrieved our saved program from our floppy disk drive. And again, you can do a very similar thing on your tape drives if you want to do those. So that should give us everything we need to know to transport ourselves back to 1980s home computing with our Commodore 64. So with the computer being such an iconic machine and so popular, there is a massive following even today and a great user base. Now, online you will find these people all over the place, and there are various forums, discussion boards and fanzine sites and so on. One of the ones I like to look at is this one called lemon64.com, which offers a good sort of mix of sort of news about old topics, new games being released, and people do still write for the Commodore 64, and you'll find all of that information sort of detailed out here with lots of links through to various articles and so on. Again, you'll find lots of actual information about the games themselves. You'll find lots of reviews for games. There is a discussion forum in there, so if you do have any issues trying to work things out, do please have a look through there. Again, as with any forum, do please have a search through before you actually post a question. Most of the questions that you will come up with, especially as a beginner, have been answered somewhere and in quite detail. So do make sure you do a look first before you venture in there. Obviously then, the SID chip inside the Commodore 64 creates a very iconic sound for computer music, so lots of people are still writing music for that and producing music for that. Obviously then into the museum has got links off to various sort of books and things. So again, you can get a real feel for the Commodore 64 scene as it is today. But along with the modern fanzine, we can of course go back to the original material, and this is where I personally find most pleasure. So with the success of the Commodore 64, of course, there was a whole mini industry built up around it, writing books, manuals, magazines, of course, were all over the place for the Commodore 64, and of course the software itself. And all of this original material has been archived pretty much on all of it online. So again, a really good place to start is the Internet Archive at archive.org, and if you just simply do various searches inside there, you'll find pretty much anything you want to. So perhaps you might want to learn a bit more about how to use the actual computer. So again, all of the manuals are available online. So we have here various manuals, again in various languages, various dates and so on. So I've picked up this one here. So this one is for the C64. the Commodore 64C, which is the model that I have in my own possession. And again, this user manual then, as you can see, is the one that came with the computer, and you can really just go through here. It takes you through everything there is to know about setting up, getting it up and running, all of those commands we use for loading disks and so on. All of that is in here, as well as then a lot of these systems did have a BASIC built into them. So of course, when you boot up, you are in actually BASIC interpreter, and this takes you through well, the beginner's basic, if you want to call it that, and how to sort of start building up your programs and so on. So again, do make sure you go through, have a look through some of these. Again, as you have the emulator sitting in front of you, it is just like having the real computer. So you will need to have a little bit of knowledge on how to use it as a computer before you can get the most out of this, all the sort of software and so on. So do have a look through those. Obviously then there are lots and lots of books that explain these things, and if you want to get deeper into the programming of it, of course there are lots of programming manuals which will tell you exactly how to use it, both in BASIC and then going into sort of machine code and other languages that were available for the machine. So again, a lots to explore there in getting into using the real computer. But pretty much the best way to experience the system is to actually go back to the magazines of the time. So this was where whenever you owned a Commodore 64 or a computer, you would tend to sort of buy monthly magazines, and that would give you all the latest news on software, games, peripherals, what was happening with the computer scene, and so on. And all of this information, of course, is pretty much online, and we can pick up any edition of pretty much any magazine we want to. And this lets us actually go back and almost trace through month by month the progression of the Commodore 64 scene. So here in the UK, we had a magazine called Commodore User. Again, on the Internet Archive, if you search for Commodore magazines, and again, I'll put these links in the description down below, you can pretty much get access to any of the magazines of the time. And again, for US, various other countries and so on. So here we have Commodore User magazine, which is, if I have on this tab over here, which is the, as I say, it was the UK sort of main Commodore magazine of the time. We have them all then in date order here, so you can see pretty much we have each month for each year. So let's head back to 1984 and see what we have in there. So here we have all 12 issues from 1984, and as you can see then, we can really just pick one out, or we could of course start at number 1 and start working our way through, and that would really give us a feel for how the whole system developed over the coming years. But just for example then, let's jump into Commodore User issue 15, which was the December Christmas edition. So if you were around at the time, you would pretty much be looking forward to getting the new release of your favourite magazine. And again, you can see here that it starts off and it has everything you need to know. So all of the game adverts and so on, and this is where you would find out which games you would like to try out. So again, we've got all the adverts here, which of course are telling you how fantastic these games are. And again, various games sort of due for release, coming out and so on. We then have, of course, the actual sort of news sections. So these magazines would report on sort of new developments for your computer, updates, various bits of new software and hardware. And if we can go through, again, you've always got all the adverts then for the various new peripherals being launched. And this really just lets you see what was happening. And again, there's some very interesting stuff you will find in here about what was going on, what people were worried about, what problems they were having with new hardware and so on. And any of these games, obviously, one of the great things that we now have is that we don't have to save up our pocket money and head down the shops to buy something. We can really just pick these up wherever we want. So let's go through and see if there's any sort of games which are worth looking at. So let's come through here. And here we have, so we have an adventure game here. Let's go off and see if we can find something over here. We have some software programming stuff. And let's see what we have now from Micropower. So here we have a range of games which we might want to have a go at. So let's see what we have here. So we have something called Jet Power Jack. So imprisoned by the evil warlord, and so on and so on. So we might think, hey, let's have a go at that. It looks like some sort of platform adventure game down here. So let's give it a go. So I've got my Vice emulator up and running. So let's go to our File and Smart Attach. And now I've got my game. So I have downloaded a repository called TOSEC, or whatever that stands for. But this is one of the sort of official software repositories, and they then have various applications and games archives, and I put them all then into various letters, so I don't have sort of like 20 or 30,000 game titles all in this one folder. So if we go into the J one, we should then find somewhere in here we have our jet power jack. And there we have a number of versions of it. So if I just open that wee bit here, you can see that we have our micro power jet powered jack, and there are, I guess, various revisions of that software were made. So let's go for the final one down here and see how that works. So I'm just going to auto start that so we get straight into the game. And there we are in our jet powered jack. So the keys for this then are ZX and the arrow key. So let's see if we can get this up and playing then. There we have our game, and I think what I have to do, I have to go and get across the maze to get to that F for fuel for the ship that's waiting for me. So let's see if we can get across here. So we have a little jetpack we can use. And if we hit any of the walls, we die. Right, okay. So let's try another go at that. So for me, although we've now tried out this game, it's probably not one I'm going to be playing a lot of, so it probably hasn't made it onto my list of top 10s. But at least you get the idea that we can now go through, we can have a look and find these little games that have been hidden away from us and give them a try. So coming back then to our magazine, we can continue looking through here and seeing what else is available. So again, lots of games. This Syncopating Sid, this is an article where and you can see here we have the actual listing for a program, and that is in effect a little sort of drum sequencer, I think. So again, we could, if we wanted to, sit here and type out this code and run that, and that would let us have a look at how that works. And again, the article takes you through how the whole system, how that code is actually structured and how it makes the actual sounds through the SID chip and so on. So again, these magazines give you that much more in-depth look into the actual use of this machine. Now, of course, the Commodore 64 was not just a games machine, and a lot of people were using it as a serious business computer. So here we have some business software. So this is VistaStar 64 from Visa Software. So let's see if we can go and find a copy of that and see exactly what you would be using in your office in 1984. So back into Vice and going off to then our files, see if we can find that program. Let's have a look in here. So again, I have downloaded the application repository from this TOSEC area. And again, we have a whole range of applications in here. So in the Visa software area here, we can see we have Visa Write, but I couldn't find the Visa Star. So again, I guess the application software was probably didn't sell as many copies as the game software, so it's probably a bit harder to find something to archive. But again, it's always worth having a look just to get a feel for what it was like with these things. So let's try this final version here. So we have the 1984 version of the software. So let's auto start that and see what it's like. So this is obviously going to be an old style word processor where, of course, there's no mouse. It's just purely keyboard to control what's going on. And of course, with the Commodore 64, we are limited to, I think it's a 40 character wide screen or something like that. So let's have a look and see if we can actually get something going here. So we've got our function keys to start off here. So let's create a new document with the F3 key, and we'll just give it a name test. And we're now into our word processor. So this is, and again, if I could type. And there we go. Again, I'm not going to win any prizes for my typing experience here. I am a two-finger typer. But again, you can see that the idea that we do have the ability to make a word processor, but hopefully it will give you an idea of how much more complicated it would have been to actually do this. And of course, as you can see here, I'm having difficulty getting the right characters in place here. So obviously there's an amount of learning of the actual software package itself. But hopefully you can see that we can get a good feel for what was available for these machines at that time. And again, we can just try these things out, get a feel for what it's like, and really just experience the world of Commodore 64 in the mid-80s. So back then to our magazine again. And we can just, of course, just carry on going through here and trying out all these different things. So again, looking at how you use your computer, there's various programming guides here and how to make better use of it. Again, all tips and tricks. And then, of course, with a lot of these magazines of the day, basic programming was sort of something which you were expected to have a go at least for certain aspects of what you do. So you will find then computer listings in here and so on. Again, we'll come to those in a wee bit. Obviously then in this magazine, we've now come to the game review section. And here you'll see some games being reviewed. Again, some of these games you might have come across, like the Ghostbusters one with the Spy versus Spy. Obviously the arcade version of Zaxxon here. And again, that'll talk you through the game, give you reviews on it, tell you how good it is, give you an idea of whether you want to play it or not. And as you've already seen, pretty much all of these games we will be able to go off into the archives, pull that out, and really have a go at it. And again, we're now seeing lots of the bits of software which you won't see appearing on any of the top 10 lists. Games which are probably sort of forgotten and just left in the archive just for people like us to come through here and rediscover. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a guide as to what you can do with this Commodore 64 and the emulation. And say, just going a bit deeper than just using it as a pure games machine and really getting that real experience of computing in the 1980s. And again, this is how we used to enjoy our computing. And as you can see, we are making more use of the computer and trying out the coding, and all of that was part of it, and getting more into the hardware and how things work together, rather than it just being a purely sort of consumer product that we use nowadays. So I hope you find this useful. Please do have a look at setting up your Commodore 64 and really do have a go at looking through some of these magazines just to experience the sort of heyday of home computing. So if you have enjoyed this, please do click that like button and subscribe to the channel for more computing, retro gaming and project work. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.